Well, welcome to Christ and Culture. My name is Pastor Jeff Short, and today I'm going to do a movie review of the recent release pro-life movie called Unplanned. And it's about the story of a woman named Abby Johnson, who was a former Planned Parenthood center director. She ran an abortion clinic, and she came out of that and became a pro-life activist, which is very rare. You don't usually have someone who is directing a Planned Parenthood, an abortion mill, actually changing and then turning to the other side and becoming a pro-life activist against abortion. But this is what happened in the case of Abby Johnson. And this movie just released, and it's doing amazingly well, even though it has been opposed, of course, by Planned Parenthood, and it's been opposed by the radical left, and it's been opposed by the culture of death and the liberals and the Democratic Party and everyone on that side. It's been opposed, and yet it's still doing amazingly well. It's in the top 5 movies into the second week or so. So how, what can account for this? Well, it's a very it's a well done movie. It's a professionally done movie. We've seen different Christian movies being put out there, for example, like God's Not Dead, God's Not Dead 1, God's Not Dead 2, God's Not Dead 3, and so on, the series there in that series, God's Not Dead. And those were, I would say, not as bad as some Christian movies were made as far as the production quality and so forth, and the acting and the directing and so forth. It's not as bad as some, but still there is a lot of room to improve as far as these independent Christian filmmakers are concerned. This movie, Unplanned, is professionally done. It seems to have, at least for the main character, the woman that portrays Abby Johnson, she does a very good job of acting. She's a good actress, and she's believable. We can sort of enter into her role playing and her character, and she seems to be someone who you would imagine that this actually took place. And it wasn't as if she were reading lines, and you could tell that she was reading lines, and she was stiff and didn't seem natural and so forth. No, she was very polished. She seems to know how to act, and she did a good job of portraying this Abby Johnson, who was the Planned Parenthood director of an abortion mill, and who converted to Christianity, and who also came out of that and came out of Planned Parenthood and came into the pro-life movement. And as an activist right now, telling people the horrors of abortion, and also telling them behind the scenes what actually happens at a Planned Parenthood abortion mill, which is very, very important information, because this is kept very closely guarded and secretive within Planned Parenthood. They don't want people to know what is going on when a girl comes into the front door of a Planned Parenthood abortion clinic. They don't want people to know what they actually tell these women who come for abortions. And one of the things that they tell them, of course, is that it's a simple procedure and hardly ever feel it, and it's easy. The next day they can go back to work, and so on and so forth. They oversell and they simplify the whole process. And that's what Abby Johnson brings out in this movie, is that they're in the business of selling abortion. They sell abortion to these girls that come in. They sell abortion to young girls who aren't even pregnant yet in the schools. They sell abortion to the population to keep it legal. And they're just promoters and sellers of abortion. And it's an industry. Planned Parenthood is a corporation. They make money. Now, it's technically set up for nonprofit status, but that doesn't mean that the people within Planned Parenthood, within this non-quote nonprofit organization, doesn't mean that they are not in it for the money, because obviously the way the movie showed the corporation, they gather their directors together, and they promote special discounts, and they promote strategies as to how to increase the number of abortions, which increases the revenue to the local abortion clinic, which increases the revenue to the national office, and so on and so forth. It's a big business. It's involving billions of dollars, and they actually, not only do they bring in money directly from the patients or the women who come in to kill their babies through abortion, they also receive taxpayer money from the U.S. government directly to the tune of about $500 million a year. So it's a big, big business, and this movie exposes that part of it, which you will not get from the mainstream media. They just will not report on it. Now, the movie Unplanned opened in theaters all across the country last week. It did very well, but the story about the advertising and marketing is a little bit complex, because a lot of outlets would not even air advertising on this movie. And the reason they didn't is because they're pro-abortion. They want abortion to continue on. They don't want anything to stop abortion. And so this movie has the potential of persuading people against abortion, against Planned Parenthood, and it has the potential of changing hearts and changing minds. And so that's why the secular media and a lot of other people in society don't want this message shown. And that's why it had a hard time advertising itself and getting the word out that this was taking place. But even in spite of all that opposition, the movie is doing very well. And I had an opportunity recently to see this movie entirely. It's about 2 hours. It comes in a little under 2 hours. And so the first thing that struck me was that the acting quality of the main character was very good, and the production quality seemed to be pretty good. Now, that doesn't mean that all of the actors in this movie did a great job. I mean, some of them, I think, were not as good as others, and I saw a couple of people in the movie that I recognized that aren't even professional actors, but rather I saw, for example, I saw Lila Rose, who is a pro-life activist. She was interviewing someone as a reporter in the movie, and she's not a professional actor or actress. She did fairly well. And then there was also the abortion doctor in the movie was actually an abortion doctor in real life, only he changed too and became pro-life after realizing suddenly that he was in fact taking human life. And his story, Dr. Levatino, is an exciting and very inspiring story to hear also. So if you don't know about him, Google Dr. Levatino, ex-abortionist, and you can find out more about his story. And that's a very helpful story to hear also. How an abortion doctor quit and stopped performing abortions. It's similar but different also from Abby Johnson's, who was a former Planned Parenthood director, and she stopped and became a pro-life activist as well. So all of the people that appeared in the movie are not actually actors. Some of them are activists, but I guess that helps, though, because it shows that this is real. These are real people. The person who played Abby Johnson did a great job, like I said before. The movie, and I'm not going to actually explain or give spoilers to the movies, because I hope that you go see the movie Unplanned and see for yourself. But they do depict a suction abortion. Not actually showing an abortion, but this is sort of a computer-generated image of an abortion, ultrasound, and it shows how the baby is aborted, and it shows on the ultrasound that the baby is being aborted. And this is what changed Abby Johnson from being pro-abortion to actually making her quit and saying, I didn't realize it was actually that violent. So that one scene, now believe it or not, that one scene made the ratings organization rate this with an R rating, which is ridiculous because the movie is not R-rated. Even the scene that supposedly caused them to have an R rating for this movie was not even a real scene. It was a computer-generated scene, and it was done in good taste. So there is really no excuse for an R rating on this movie because many of the very women, the teenagers, who need to see this movie now cannot just walk into a theater and see the movie. They have to be accompanied by an adult because they are minors, which will block a lot of the women, the young girls, the young women who need to see this movie from seeing it, which is a shame. But nevertheless, the movie still is doing pretty well at the box office, better than expected. And so we can only pray that God uses this movie to bring out the truth in a lot of people and expose Planned Parenthood for what it is. It's this murder company. They're trafficking. Their product is killing babies, and that needs to be brought out and that needs to be shown. And if you, in the process of showing that, offend people or upset people, then so be it, because it is an upsetting thing. You know, one of the tactics of Planned Parenthood is to try to minimize the unpleasant aspects of abortion. And the Planned Parenthood directors and the counselors are all trained in how to respond to all kinds of objections. If women are coming in, they have doubts, and they have, for example, religious objections. They think that maybe this is a sin and maybe God doesn't want this to happen. The counselor, according to the movie, depicted in the movie, is actually shown how to field those objections. And the way that the counselors were trained is that when someone says, well, maybe God doesn't want this to happen, they're to turn it back around and try to say, well, maybe God wants you to have this abortion because he wants you to be happy, and he doesn't want you to have a bad life, and he doesn't want you to have to suffer an unwanted pregnancy, and so forth. So in other words, they change the question about God. They flip it around and they say, well, God wouldn't want you to be your life ruined with a pregnancy, and God wouldn't want this, and God wouldn't want that. In other words, they just simply try to get around these objections. It doesn't matter if they're actually doing theology. It doesn't matter if they're actually teaching the correct Christian viewpoint. They're just trying to sound spiritual. They're just trying to sound religious, and they're trying to get that girl away from religion and the Bible and the church enough to get over. And they actually have a planned tactic that the movie brings out that says, well, I know you have a lot of doubts about this abortion, but let's schedule it anyway, and then if something comes up, we can always cancel it. So they try to get those girls to schedule an abortion and to actually pay for a down payment, and knowing that once the down payment is paid, then the girls are more apt to go ahead with it so that they don't lose any money. And most of these young women are not rich, and they have to scrape enough money to get this abortion, and they don't want to lose the money. They also use a tactic. They say, well, if you schedule your abortion today, we can discount it 10% or 20%. And so they're throwing these financial incentives at the young woman. She's already confused, so she's having to think now financial and wheel and deal financially. And so this, again, overwhelms them. They go ahead and schedule it, and then Planned Parenthood does everything they can to try to get the girl to actually come in and follow up on the abortion. So the movie shows that inside procedure, and it shows how Planned Parenthood is this really cold and business-like organization at the corporate level. Now, a lot of the directors, like Abby Johnson, they are more humane, quote, humane, in thinking that they're doing something good for women. That is one of the things that struck me with this movie, is Abby Johnson got involved with Planned Parenthood in the beginning because she felt that this was something that was going to actually help women. And there wasn't this emphasis on just doing abortions. It was helping women in all phases of planning their pregnancies, planning their childbearing years, and so on and so forth. But as it turned out, that Planned Parenthood, the bottom line, it boils right on down to increasing the numbers of abortions, so that increasing the number of revenue dollars brought in to Planned Parenthood. And it boiled down to a matter of dollars and cents. And that is actually one of the factors, in addition to seeing an abortion through the ultrasound. One of the factors was that she was seeing how ruthless and brutal this cold, calculating corporation is, Planned Parenthood, and how they really were trying to actually increase the numbers as far as abortions go and the dollars coming in. And they were actually reaching out and trying to recruit women to have abortions. And that was one of the things that Abby Johnson didn't like also. She had always thought that when she signed up for Planned Parenthood, that it was about making abortion safe, legal, and rare, so that you wouldn't have as many abortions. In fact, that's one of the reasons why she got into that, is that she was trying to help women so that there wouldn't have to be abortions ultimately, because they would then know how to plan their families and so forth. But then she got further into the hierarchy of Planned Parenthood, and she realized that it was just about abortion. And the bottom financial line was abortion, and generating more money, and generating more abortions, and making more money, and so on and so forth. And the whole phrase safe, legal, and rare, like we used to hear all the time from a lot of the Democrats and the liberals and the leftists, that is no longer the governing motto of Planned Parenthood or these other organizations that promote abortion. Safe, legal, and rare has fallen by the wayside, and now it's just about total and unrestricted access to abortion for any reason at all. And especially with the new chemical abortion that is being pushed by Planned Parenthood. They show in the movie that they said they want eventually 50% of all abortions to be chemical abortion. In other words, the woman takes a pill and then has the dead child in a toilet, and there is no surgery involved. There's no doctor that has to be paid. There's no high overhead. It's just all a pill that they're taking, and then they have their own child flushed down the toilet. It's such a gruesome and very awful thing. Now, the movie does show, the only other controversial scene in the movie was when Abby Johnson herself had a chemical abortion, and the movie shows that it wasn't just a matter of taking a few pills and then having her baby flushed down the toilet. It wasn't just as simple as that. Actually, when she took the pills, she began to bleed, and she had to go into the bathroom, and it was almost a nightmare over the next few hours, because she would continue to bleed, and then finally her dead baby, she had to actually pick up parts of her baby. It was a gruesome experience, a traumatic experience that Planned Parenthood doesn't like to talk about, and they don't like to admit to the fact that when you give women pills that, one, kills their baby inside of them, and then two, starts to start the process of birth and expelling the product, what they call POC, product of a conception, but what Planned Parenthood often also refers to as pieces of children, and that was brought out in the movie. When these young women take the pill and it kills the baby in their womb, and then it's supposed to simply pass out of them and be flushed down the toilet, and everything is out of sight, out of mind. That's what they're told at Planned Parenthood. It doesn't happen that way. There are complications quite frequently, and that's one of the things that the movie brings out, is that this so-called simple process is not so simple. The so-called painless process is not so painless, because it actually is involving the passing of a baby that has been killed in the womb through these chemical pills. And they don't always pass easily, and they don't always pass cleanly into the toilet and flush down the toilet. Now, just think of that whole idea of your baby. You are taking a pill to kill your baby, your child, your young child. You're killing your young baby. And then you are going to pass that dead baby into the toilet and flush it away. This is such a horrendous concept in and of itself. Just the concept of you killing your own baby, you flushing your baby down the toilet, and parts of your baby going down into the sewer. In the case of Abby Johnson, she decided to go into the shower next to the toilet and just let the water wash over her. And yet what happened was baby parts, body parts, actually passed out of her, and she had to pick them up from the bathtub shower and put them in the toilet. It was an awful, awful scene, and I think that we need to see for ourselves that this happens a lot. This happens frequently. Planned Parenthood will never admit to that. Planned Parenthood will never admit that anything happens, anything like this, but it happens. According to Abby Johnson, they are told to downplay the complications, downplay the risk, downplay any uncomfortable and unpleasant things about the procedure, and they are supposed to just talk positive and encourage the girls, and just everything is up and positive, but that's not the way it actually is. And so this movie does a great job of explaining the reality of abortion, the reality of what happens when there's a suction abortion. It shows on the ultrasound what actually happens to the baby. You see in the ultrasound a fully functioning, fully formed baby, and then you see the suction come in to the ultrasound television picture, and then you see the baby slowly but surely disappear. And where did it go? It went through the suction machine and out, and they throw the contents away. And then it shows also in the movie that the dump truck, the guy comes in with the huge 55-gallon drums and comes out to the truck, and everybody knows what are in those drums, the fetal parts. And it shows the reality of this. Now, in our society, we try to sanitize all of this. Planned Parenthood, of course, tries to minimize and keep out of sight everything unpleasant. They try to shelter these women coming into the clinic. They don't want the pro-life activists. Now, it does show the activists on the periphery of the abortion clinic. And some of the activists are militants. Some of the activists are aggressive. Some of the activists are loud, and they shout at the women and try to get them to change their mind. But it also showed other activists who are more silent and are a silent witness. They pray outside the abortion clinics. They talk and try to persuade. It's not just shouting. It's not just confrontation. But it showed particularly a young couple who were speaking to Abby Johnson when she would go in every day and out. And they were greatly concerned about what was taking place inside. And they would actually talk to Abby. And eventually, when Abby Johnson came out, this couple would help Abby get a new job and help her process the reality of abortion, and helped her find forgiveness through faith in God and prayer. And so it showed a really good example of pro-life activism that is not the more confrontational type, but it's more of the persuasion type. Let's just talk. Let's think about what's taking place and think about what's happening in an abortion clinic and how that is wrong, and how, as human beings, we cannot allow this to happen, and it's not right. And the women who are going in are being deceived. They're being told that it's just a clump of tissue. It's just some kind of a surgical procedure, that's all. And it's not anything to be alarmed about. That's what Planned Parenthood tells them. But if someone sits down and calmly and rationally understands what's actually taking place, it is actually the taking of a human life. And that needs to be brought out also. So the movie does a great job in not only showing the horrific event of an abortion, but it also sets a context for why this is so very wrong, and how Planned Parenthood, as this big corporation, actually consciously, deliberately tries to deceive women into thinking that this is something easy, routine, no big problem. And in reality, it is a major, major moral problem, and it is a crime, and it's wrong that this organization should be able to talk to young girls, talk to women, and deceive them in such a way. And so the movie is going to be a powerful weapon against abortion. And that's why I know that the leftists and the Democratic Party and Planned Parenthood, of course, want to do everything they can to minimize the damage of this movie, because this movie is powerful. So I would highly recommend, if you have an opportunity to go see this movie, I would highly recommend that you take the time to view this movie and share it with other people. If they are kind of on the fence about abortion, or they're not quite sure about abortion, they haven't formulated their own views on it, I would definitely recommend showing them or taking them to see this movie,